supporting behaviours in animals are just brilliant.
Yeah. I think birds, though, definitely probably take the cake, though. They got some very cool dances.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And all these different behaviours.
All the lecking stuff, Birds of Paradise in New Guinea that David Attenborough showcased to the world. And yeah, that's really probably what hooked me into birds, I think, was seeing all of those kinds of BBC documentaries about birds that he did, the bowerbirds and the Birds of Paradise. Once you are introduced to that world, it's pretty hard to not be bewitched by it.
Bird people.
Yeah, crazy bird people. Proud of it.
This production was recorded at the podcast studios in the Media Arts Centre at Murdoch University. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Murdoch University. Any content provided by the hosts and guests are their personal opinions and are not intended to represent the views or opinions of the university, its administration, faculty, or staff. Now we have that out of the way, let's talk science. Paramount importance.
Well, it's a very strong community, the bird people as well. They're, in terms of probably in any animal that I can remember, they're probably the strongest, most connected.
Yeah, so probably as far as a taxonomic group that has a dedicated population of people focused on it, birds are definitely where it's at. Increasingly, and incidentally, people of all different walks of life professionally as well. So psychologists, medical doctors, biologists, all kinds of professions find themselves as pretty avid bird watchers, as opposed to, for example, there's a growing trend in herp chasing reptiles.
Yeah.
And I would speculate that they're pretty much all some kind of biologist.
I can't think of any of the ones, anybody that I know that goes looking for reptiles or even amphibians, non-biologists. The people, as you mentioned, the diversity of people within the birding community. My dad said this a few weeks ago, that he was going to get into photography and bird watching. That I was like, what? It was like he would have been one of the last people I ever thought.
Farmer?
No. He did grow up on a farm, but that side of his life has been long gone.
Yeah.
Was never. He's kind of that probably more typical Australian male, loves going to collect wood, fires, watching the footy, beers with his mates kind of thing.
Yeah.
All of a sudden just came out, I think I'm going to get into bird photography.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, so there's a bit of a explanation there around bird photography can be quite technical, right? So about the settings on the camera, the composition of an image, balance, all the rest of it. And men, I'm generalizing, but there is actually some research that speaks to this. Men are really quite good at taking on those very technical pastimes and hobbies and mastering that. Right. It's something that really does attract men. And some of the research on this is actually around the keeping of aquaria. Men are much better at keeping aquaria than women.
Aquaria?
Fish tanks.
No way.
Yeah. Because so much of what's involved in successfully keeping aquaria is around physicochemical properties, right? Men will just stay the course and keep going at it until they get the pH right, they get everything right. Because sometimes lots of fish have to die in that process. Women give up. The emotional impact is too high. I myself tried to do the neon tetra thing for a while and too many died and that was it. I was done. I couldn't kill any more fish.
That's a really interesting point you've just brought up because when a podcast I did with Jen Verdun about Antarctica with the women in STEM, she talked about one of the differences from her Arctic expeditions, which were mainly males on the boat, to the ones when she went to Antarctica with the females, was the emotional connection that the females had that was like a lot more when confronting when they came against things that probably weren't as pleasant to see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
It is. It's a look. As I say, I am a feminist. I'm fortunate that I haven't had to face much sexism myself as a woman in science. But I think there are some differences between us, and sometimes they play to certain strengths for sure. So bird photography, it doesn't surprise me that your dad would decide to turn his hand to something like that.
It was one of the most mind-blowing things he said to me. What about the age thing? Is it because of like cameras are expensive? Because it's the bird watching community there's older. Generally a lot older.
I'm usually the youngest in the room. It's great for my ego. First of all, retirees, more time on their hands.
Yeah.
So they have more disposable time. Kids have usually grown up doing their own thing. And I think a lot of people, once they retire as well, realize that they're going to need something else to fill their mind and their time. And lots of people will take on other kinds of volunteering opportunities to bring that purpose to their life. My dad just plays more golf and spends a lot of time in his garden. A lot of people decide that bird watching is going to be one of the things that they venture into because they've got the time. And yes, a little bit of the disposable income, but I really, when I'm out talking to community about birds and becoming aware of birds and connecting to nature, I spend a lot of time talking about bare naked birding. You don't need to remove your clothes. You can actually stay fully clothed to do bare naked birding. It's all about not needing optics, not needing to make the investment in binoculars or a camera with a big telephoto lens. You can start bird watching just with your naked eye. So,
yeah. I guess, and even like everyone has usually a smartphone these days.
Yeah.
There's a lot of apps as well, which are pretty cool. I've seen one of the main ones, which is a lot of them I've had friends get into that I didn't think were going to be into bird watching too, was like, because it's that collection of can you spot all these different species?
Yes, so there's that element as well. And that's something that certainly the bird watching community has tried to tap into when it comes to garnering more citizen science effort, tapping into that competitive streak. So eBird, iNaturalist, all of these platforms, citizen science platforms, really do tap into the competitive spirit of people, and it's a way to get people of all age groups involved as well. So young ones will often respond to that call to be competitive about something. So
well, like this week, so this podcast is going to come out a lot later than what this week is, but at the moment it's the Aussie bird count.
That's right.
So what is the impact of like community and things like that that can help out with conservation?
So for the Aussie bird count, for quite a while, for the first couple of years, those data that were coming in, we were getting about 800,000 birds counted a year, so individuals, not species. And so that's great. That was an excellent engagement exercise to get people aware and involved. Aware of the notion of stopping and recording something and then submitting it. And the data that came about in those first year or two of the Aussie bird count, they had limited application because we just didn't have quite enough. And also the level of confidence that you can have in species ID and those kinds of attributes of those data sets, there were some limitations. But then as the event has gone on, and we're now, I think, well over 5 years of the Aussie bird count, people have come back year after year. So their IDs can probably have a little bit more confidence around them because they're spending more time watching birds. Likewise, though, the back end tech behind the Aussie bird count, so the app, has some really great geofencing aspects to it. So wherever you are, it knows where you are and what birds you're actually likely to be seeing. So if, for example, you say, if I was to do an Aussie bird count here and I think I've got a satin bowerbird in my backyard, the app's going to say, I really don't think so. You're on the wrong side of the continent. So it's really good when you can have tools that have those kinds of validity checks built in. And the app also has now at the front end for the user some questions and tips on how to ID the birds that you're actually trying to log a sighting for. So fast forward to now where we're, I think, approaching 3 million birds being counted in this week. in a week, that's a lot. That's a lot of individuals counted. That's a really powerful snapshot of how our birds are going. And so this, in combination with the Atlas of Birds data that's been around for a very long time, we've been able to detect nationwide trends in what's happening with our birds. Kookaburras are declining even though they don't belong here. Nationally, they are declining. And other species that we can't really have a good sense of how they're going unless we get this snapshot in time, mass accumulation of data. And that's the Aussie bird count's really, really powerful for that. So
yeah, it's definitely growing too. I think this is my mum's second year. Like she loves her birds. In our family group chat, she's constantly sending videos of the birds and the bird buff. We have like a lot of whitetail cockies that come in there, and she had like a family of crows for multiple years that would follow her around like in the garden and all that. There was a sort of a love-hate relationship. They were really cheeky. As soon as she turned her back, they would go get the roses and pull the roses off.
Oh my gosh.
And then she'd turn and then they'll run, like fly away a little bit, turn around.
They're so smart.
They are super funny.
Yeah, corvids are super smart.
Yeah. So what impact does that have also, like for in conservation? Does that lead to then different policies and all that? Or is that like how justifiable is the data or accurate the data? Because
look, the organisation that is behind the Aussie Bird Count is BirdLife Australia. Okay, so I've been volunteering with BirdLife since 2013, 12 years, and they recognised as the Atlas data is a really high quality repository of data about Australia's birds, which has informed the State of Australia's Birds reports that get released every 10 years. And then now with the Aussie Bird Count happening every year, those data, then probably not enough in terms of policy to, for example, change a decision that's referred to the Commonwealth. All right, so those data wouldn't stand up in court to challenge a decision that has been referred to the Commonwealth through the EPBC Act. However, local governments do seek those data for their respective areas from BirdLife Australia, and at the local level, to have an understanding of how different species are going, those data can really help those local governments make informed decisions about strategies and policies they have at that scale. And indeed, BirdLife would, I think, argue that they are their biggest clients for coming to them asking for the Aussie Bird Count data is local government authorities.
Right.
And so policy on that very local scale.
I guess then also it can like highlight areas of interest for researchers too, to then get that data that can stand up in court.
Absolutely. Yeah. And citizen science is really great for that, in that sometimes it can alert us. It can give us a bit of a red flag around an issue or for a particular species or a particular location. And that's then the point at which the professionals quickly launch into action and go out and collect rigorous, systematic data that does stand up to be held to account in court, basically. And citizen science is really good for that.
What about globally? Is there same sort of initiatives elsewhere in the world?
Definitely. So this all really started in the Northern Hemisphere. So the Christmas count has been an annual event in the US for a long time. Audubon is the big conservation NGO for birds in America, and they've had their Christmas count for many, many years. The RSPB in the UK has had Spring Watch for a long time, and in fact that was partnered with BBC as well. So it was broadcast every evening at prime time. The BBC would have a Spring Watch update, and so people all over the UK would be watching TV at 7 o'clock at night and have their programs interrupted for a Spring Watch update, and they'd have roving nature journalists out across the UK reporting what cool things had been seen. So and this has been going on for decades over there. So it's definitely not a foreign concept on a global scale or anything new. And in terms of how it's had an impact on conservation globally, probably one of the ones that is close to my heart is the migratory shorebird monitoring that happens here in Australia. So we have the Australian Wader Study Group, which are these very, very clever people that can ID migratory shorebirds when they're not in breeding plumage. Not an easy task because they're just essentially all little grey birds standing in clusters of hundreds of birds. So to be able to ID birds and do rigorous surveys in those conditions is not easy. But there are people that will do it year after year in the austral summer when these shorebirds are here. So over time, those surveys have obviously created a long-term data set that's of very high value now. And it was because of those voluntary surveys that we were able to detect about 15 years ago, I think it is now, don't quote me on the exact number, but that we were seeing these massive declines in our migratory shorebirds in the East Asian Australasian flyway. And so really without that long-term data set, we wouldn't have been able to demonstrate those declines to such a high degree of confidence.
What were the declines from?
So the main source of the global scale declines in our flyway has been development in intertidal zones through East Asia.
So they don't get enough food?
So it's in their resting stops on their way from the far northern hemisphere to Australia. They fly through from Alaska, Siberia, all the way up in the Palearctic, Arctic. They all fly south in our flyway. So there's six big flyways all around the world. East Asian Australasian flyway. So they fly south. They sort of funnel through East Asia. So China, Korea, Japan. And then once they get south of the equator, they spread out, they radiate out again. Western Australia, Eastern Australia, New Zealand. And through East Asia, they need to stop because a 747 couldn't make that journey without stopping for a refuel, right? So these shorebirds would stop in these intertidal zones, huge marsh areas and estuarine areas, do their best to put on as much weight as they can in the space of a week or so, which is all of your invertebrates that live.
Yeah, well, they put on like almost double their weight, right?
Over summer here, yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
so they can't put on that much weight in their staging on their rest stops.
Yeah.
They have a quick refuel and a rest, and then they carry on with their journey south.
Because these are also some of the biggest migrations of any animal,
Absolutely.
Right? And there's like birds like the size of our fist.
Absolutely. So a guy that I worked with at University of Queensland, Professor Richard Fuller, he's done a lot of work on these shorebirds and he's been involved with tracking their declines. And Rich speaks about it really from the heart. He wears his heart on his sleeve when he talks about this stuff, and hearing his emotional response talking about going to Korea himself and seeing the scale of the habitat loss and how that affected him, he broke down in tears on national radio talking about this. And so he is someone that's inspired me. So he's been involved in some of the tracking studies. They put transmitters on bar-tailed godwits, one of the species of shorebirds, and I think E6 was the name that this particular tagged bird was, and it went from Alaska to I think it was New Zealand, in virtually one go, and in 6 days I think it took that particular bird.
Wow.
So insane. And then so they get to Australia.
For people to put that in perspective, it's like continuously flapping.
Pretty much.
Like these shorebirds don't rest on the water. They can't float on the water, so they have to continually fly.
They can
fly
sometimes
through storms, whatever,
insane,
strong winds.
up in the jet stream. So a lot of them I think do drop onto some of the Pacific Islands and have a rest, but they can't. The food is not there for them the way it has been historically in East Asia. So it really is just a rest stop if they find themselves on an island, some amazing island in the Pacific. Anyway, so these birds, they get to this habitat that's now hugely converted and industrialised, and then have to try and find what they can to continue their journey to Australia or New Zealand. And when they get here, yes, they're just a shadow of their former selves and have to then spend our summer going hard, feeding on invertebrates in our intertidal estuaries and resting as well. So as little energy expenditure as possible and as much energy consumption as possible. Like that ratio just needs to be exactly the opposite if you want to lose weight, right? So, and there's photos of before and after from when they arrive to when they leave. But it's such an amazing demonstration of the power of these huge long-term data sets that citizens have collected that across Australia to be able to demonstrate these massive declines. And we're talking 90+% of the global population gone.
Wow.
And I don't think we fully understand just what implications that will have for the ecology of just the extent of the area these birds occur across.
Yeah. So just recently, when was it? No, actually, it's not that recent anymore. November last year. Or was it April this year? I'm getting dates confused in my head. I was up north for one of the bird counts in Duralia in Exmouth for the shorebirds. And potentially Richard was there. I don't know. There was a whole bunch of like really researchers from all around Australia, like absolutely fascinating. And like we did cannon netting and like that was super exciting. Like for people to understand what cannon netting is we buried.
Dramatic.
It was very dramatic. Like almost one of the coolest ways. Like I think I'm sort of jumbling up what I'm getting to of my point here, but I'm going to quickly start off in this area first. We talked a bit, like when I was there, it was all the older generation and they were saying that it's harder to get younger scientists to come in and work in this area. And my thought was like, well, do people know the type of sampling that you're doing? Like with the mist netting, cannon netting, all that's like super exciting, super like amazing, like interesting work. But like none of that was ever showed. I had no idea that this is what they were doing. And so I was up there to film them and interview all the scientists and show what we're doing. And like for cannon netting, it's literally we were burying a net in the sand. Then you wait for a few hours for high tide or to a low tide to go down. And then the shorebirds come in to feed in on those invertebrates in the sand. And then is it called twitching? Yeah. When you like sort of walk the birds to the area? Oh, no, twitching, twinkling.
Twinkling, okay.
Yeah, twinkling.
Yeah.
So you like kind of like slowly walk the birds to like where the area of the net is, and then you actually fire out cannons. That throw this massive net over the birds. Like, and then it's like this mad rush.
It is. And because the welfare of the birds is obviously still very high priority for the researchers in this space. And it is a stressful experience for the birds. So they want to get that cannon net, they want to get the birds, they want to process them as quickly as possible and then get out of there, right, to let those birds go back to their natural behaviour. It is a challenging space to get scientists to do. I'm not a bander. I'm not an A-class bander, as they're called.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question, actually.
So I've done mist netting a couple of times with certified banders. I had an experience where I went out with a PhD student to do some banding and mist netting, and he left me with a mist net. Anyway, a fantail flew into this mist net and he was out of earshot, and I hadn't process to untangle them before. So I was not confident to start trying to untangle this bird. I just needed him to get back ASAP. And this little fantail is here and it's not looking good. And I just thought, if this bird dies from stress from this experience, how will I ever look at myself in the mirror again? And I guess I shied away from going on to become a mist netter or a bander in that situation because I found the experience so stressful. And for me, I think I'm happy doing observational ecology
Right, okay.
Yeah. So
Can we explain what a mist net is first?
So a mist net is a really super fine net. It looks a bit like a volleyball net. When it's up, it's on two poles usually, and then there's a net that's put across these two poles, and it's so fine. It's almost like it's made from the thread that pantyhose are made from. It's so fine, and so the birds don't see it, obviously. And then when they're flying through, they fly into the net. Ideally, the researcher is there, quickly jumps to action, gets the bird out, processes that usually morphometrics are taken, so beak to tail length, wing length, age, broods if it's been on eggs or anything like that. So you can tell those kinds of things from the feathers around the abdomen. So all of those sorts of data are collected. Often the bird is banded then to say it's been processed. It could be a part of a study looking at population mark recapture. It could also be looking at nomad species. So particularly through Eastern Australia and the eucalypt-based habitats, we get a lot of nomadic honeyeaters. So it could be tracking that from season to season. Yeah, so you could be misnetting and banding birds for a whole bunch of reasons. For the shorebirds, they have leg flags, and often this is something that is a huge opportunity for people getting into bird watching and photography to get involved in. Is, you know, if people are in a coastal environment somewhere and they happen to have the camera that's got the big enough zoom on it, and they could snap a shorebird with a leg flag and get that sighting on that photo to that researcher, you know, this is also a really great opportunity and a way that photographers do help contribute citizen science.
That was happening actually when we were up there with there was people there for weeks or months beforehand taking photos of these birds and saying that, oh, like this flock was here beforehand, because, like, you know, you might time it off by a few weeks and then the birds are already left.
Yeah.
So they were able to get the recapture from some of these different bands.
Exactly.
Of groups of birds.
Which is great because you don't actually have to capture the bird then.
Yeah, that's exactly. That's true. That's true. We were also testing up there the avian influenza, that crazy disease that's killing millions and millions.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it's not more.
So I did a talk last night out in community, an outreach talk, and someone asked me this, and it's full disclosure, it's not something I've been micro-tracking myself in terms of how it's going. I know that it's not here yet.
Yeah.
And so someone in this audience asked me, why do I think it hasn't turned up here yet? And this, I'm purely speculating, but we were thinking if it was going to arrive here, it would have arrived over the last summer with the migratory shorebirds. Why didn't it get here? Potentially the birds that did have it were in such poor condition, they didn't complete the migration.
Yeah, I've forgotten the researcher's name. You'd know him. One of the East Coast universities, really famous in the bird area. He was studying it.
Yeah.
And he said the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Because I asked him
so
why. So
they just haven't made it.
Because we're the last continent. It's in Antarctica.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
not here.
Yeah, that's right. And it's that distance that these birds are traversing through our flyway. And so they're already in poor condition because they don't have enough food in East Asia. Add that to the mix, they're just not going to make it. And also when you're talking about disease transmission, especially vector-borne diseases, the birds are the vector essentially. We have less vectors because of their populations having declined so much. So the chances are less because of the status of so many of our shorebirds in really dire straits, to be honest. So,
and just to give a background for everyone else that know how deadly this virus is. It's was that last time? So it was it 280 something million or 28 million?
Yeah, and I'm not sure about how many of those are wild birds relative to
like chickens. And, yeah, okay. But then that's the implication it has for humans.
Of course.
The food resources. And then it's also switching. I saw it's switched into some mammals, like sea mammals and stuff as well, like the seals. And
in a way, that's for something a wildlife disease issue. The only time they will throw money at it is if it does become a biosecurity issue for our aviculture in this case, or public health. So if it was only affecting wild birds and didn't pose any threat to cage birds, I don't imagine.
That's actually an interesting point you've made, because that's a topic or a wall that I keep coming up against, is that people only care about if it affects them directly or monetary value of things. I was being so persistent on this conservation journey, we conserve our environments, conserve it. And people are I want to I like conserving, I want to conserve, but they don't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Till it's monetary involved, and it's don't in my space, it's the estuarine ecosystems that I'm like trying to find funding to fund my projects for. And it's like, if there's no way that people can benefit off it, or politically as well. But
it's unfortunate because what that also demonstrates is the disconnect between how people view functioning ecosystems and all of their component parts being in existence to what makes this planet actually livable for us. And each time we lose a component of an ecosystem, we're putting more pressure on those systems being able to continue to provide for us through all the things we learn about in primary school, for heaven's sake, clean air, clean water. Maybe by the time you get to high school, you're learning about pollination and dispersal, which a lot of our agriculture relies on. So all of these systems, all of this ecosystem function that we do need, but because it's so disconnected from us in our day-to-day life, people don't understand what's to be lost if we don't act. That's I think the thing that's really scary. The disconnect is so vast. Yeah, about just how reliant we are. And that's one ideological way of viewing it, and that speaks to, I guess, the utilitarian value system of people. That's not why I do it. That's not why I continue to get out of bed every day and do what I do. I do it because I just, personally, for me, it's a moral / ethical thing. These species they do actually have a right to exist. Ecosystems have a right to continue to function. Rights holders, conversations about rights holders. It's a very complicated space. So,
politically too.
Yes, exactly. Well, unfortunately our native species don't get a vote. So
no.
Yeah, but there are definitely still people out there who just want to act for the environment because they feel it's the right thing to do, not because they derive a benefit.
I think there's a difference between loving and caring to actually like making and doing something though, that going that extra step to actually do something. I think there's very, very few people do. We've touched base on like the community and citizen science side of it all. Like the birding community is massive. Is there negative effects with it though? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely there can be. It's gradient.
Yeah.
And so there's impacts at a local scale potentially, and there's global scale impacts. So if we start probably small on local scale impact, if a bird watcher decides they really, really want to see and or photograph a particular species of bird, what lengths are they willing to go to? Are they willing to walk off of a established walking trail and trample vegetation? Are they willing to actually remove vegetation to get that perfect photo? Are they willing to potentially flush that bird off of a nest where it might be incubating eggs to get the perfect photo or the perfect view? So all of these things do happen in the bird watching world. I wouldn't say that it is the majority. I think it is the minority of bird watchers that are this selfish in how they go about their pastime. Certainly, I did my PhD on bird watchers and the connection to conservation, and I asked people questions to try and ascertain this picture a little more clearly. It's not something we'd done very well previous to that. My research found the vast majority of bird watchers are quite ecocentric, and they really do recognise the importance of birds as a part of ecosystems. So again, I just reiterate, I think it's the minority that do those kinds of more damaging activities when it comes to bird watching. However, if we go broader scale, global scale, there are people that will fly very vast distances at great expense to our atmosphere and burn lots of fossil fuel to go and see new birds. And they would have to be planting a lot of trees to offset that carbon. And whether that occurs to them, I don't know. That's not something I asked in my research. But yeah, everything does have a cost when when we're looking for nature to yield something for us. So
I think a lot of people, though, probably come with that mindset of like, oh, I'm just one person. I'm not doing much. Or like this walking off a path to get a photo. It's like, oh, I'm one. I'm not going to make that much damage. Maybe they realize it's a little bit. And then on the other aspect, from like say the flying to a different place to go bird watching, in my mind, my first thought would be like, well, I'm not like a sports star that's flying constantly, or a politician that's just going to go have lunch with this person.
That's right. It's all relative.
It's all relative to do that. And then I would be sort of in my way justifying in my head. It's like, oh, I'm like taking photos of birds to raise it with quotations, raise awareness.
Yeah, that's right.
So
that's
like,
right.
How much damage does that do? Like if it's let's start with say the walking off a path.
Sure. So it's that particular scenario, it sort of speaks to that tragedy of the commons. So for the people that might be listening to this later, Tragedy of the Commons is a piece that was written a long time ago. Hardin, I think, is the author, if I remember correctly, or Malthus. Anyway, there's a couple of key papers that I was introduced to in my undergrad, and Tragedy of the Commons was one of them. And they speak about this belief that if it's only one person, it doesn't matter. It's such a small impact if it's only one person. The problem arises when lots and lots of people continue to engage in an activity with that frame of mind. That's the tragedy of the commons. If I dump my waste in this river, it's only my waste that's getting dumped. It's not a problem. The solution to pollution is dilution. But if everybody along that river is doing it.
Very relative to the fishing community.
Exactly.
Now, I'm just taking a few fish.
That's right.
The amount of that builds up with the pressure.
Right. Exactly. So, and that's probably one of the really pertinent examples of the tragedy of the commons is the state of our fisheries. So in bird watching, where that then really becomes a problem, people that are bird tour guides find themselves in situations sometimes where they're under a lot of pressure to deliver for their high-paying customer, right? So someone might have paid them thousands of dollars to take them out.
It's crazy, some of these numbers I've heard before.
And some of these really dedicated bird watchers will front up with a list of species and an expectation that guide will deliver. And so case in point, there's a species in far north Queensland called the golden bowerbird. It's the smallest bowerbird in Australia, but it builds the biggest bower. So it's got some compensation issues. And so it's a very sought after bird, far north Queensland endemic, and a bowerbird anyway, they're really cool. So lots of people want to see them. Now, there's been a couple of bowerbirds. They're quite long-lived birds relative to some of our other songbirds. So a satin bowerbird, for example, I think can live to 20 plus years. So they're pretty long-lived. And a golden bowerbird bower can be in place 5-10 years, this one male in the one spot. If he's getting disturbed frequently enough by the tour guide that knows where that bower is because it's a static feature in the environment, eventually that bowerbird, and this has happened with the golden bowerbird, what was previously reliable locations of bowers are no longer, because the bird eventually just goes, you know what, I'm so done with you rocking up with people clicking shutters at me, I'm out. And they'll move and they'll go away. That's a problem when you're dealing with something that's rare, that has probably already lost quite a lot of its habitat. And the bird disperses away from that area from repeated disturbance on the assumption that there is habitat somewhere else for it. And we know that that's not necessarily the case. They may be dispersing into an area that is inhospitable, that's now agriculture, or just doesn't have the right habitat variables for it to be able to persist. And that's the biggest problem. So where you've got threatened and rare species in fragmented landscapes that get exposed to repeated disturbance, they leave, and potentially they leave to find a fate that is not good for them. So, yeah.
This is a problem with ecotourism, because I heard this exact story, but for whales from Max and Katie, which is a podcast that hasn't come out yet from here, but by this one time does. That podcast was about, and they talked about with the southern right whales, with the mothers and calves, they'll go shelter in a small bay and they need to rest. The calf needs to feed, needs to put on weight to make journeys. People come up to it.
Yeah.
Or when the mother is calving, I think is also the other part. She goes to a bay, usually the same place that she was born, I think.
Yeah.
And then they, under the assumption, the whales under the assumption that this is a safe place to give birth. And then when people come up and spook it, they think they're just driving past, or they're like, oh, it's just like, it's fine. Like, you see people going up, spook the whale swims off to finds another bay, and a lot of time it's like unsuccessful.
Yeah.
And then the whale ends up losing its calf, and like people don't see that impact.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
So certainly nature-based tourism. If anybody is disturbing whales or any kind of animal in the course of their tourism activities, and there's an obvious response by those animals, that's not ecotourism. That's green. If they're calling themselves ecotourism, that's greenwashing. Because ecotourism, the first rule, number one rule, minimize or mitigate negative impacts on the environment. If you can't do that, if you cannot have operational practices in place that mean you do not disturb your wildlife, you are not delivering ecotourism. So it's nature-based tourism, but as I teach in the unit I teach here, which is nature-based tourism, for it to be authentic ecotourism, it really expects a bit more. And it's pretty rare for an operation to tick all of the ecotourism boxes. So it's about minimising negative environmental impacts, promoting positive environmental behaviours, enhancing positive outcomes for local communities, and also delivering education to the tourists. It's pretty rare for a single operation to tick every single box. And it's really context dependent. It depends on where it is. So in that situation, to be quite honest, a lot of the large marine mammal tourism products in Australia are certainly nature-based tourism, but I'm not convinced they're all ecotourism.
Right. Yeah, not surprised. Like you hear a lot of things.
And it's so vulnerable to the actions of individuals, right? So a business can have an ethos, but if you happen to have one staff member who's a bit of a cowboy, that can dash all of that in an instant. If there's a skipper on a boat that for whatever reason decides they're going to go for those whales to get the guests a good view, it's a real challenge. So it's really down to sometimes the individual to drive those kinds of behaviours, whether it be the guides or the tourists themselves. So, yeah. I was in Spain, speaking about carbon footprints, I was in Spain and I decided, because I was in a part of Spain that's really quite good for bird watching, so I decided to pay a guide to take me out for the day. And in the very first email I sent to that guide, I actually stipulated I do not have species list that I'm trying to tick. I'm grateful for anything. I do not want any bird disturbance whatsoever. I do not want any use of calls to play back calls.
Well, why is that bad?
Because it disturbs them. Like if you're playing a call to a bird and getting a response from that bird, you're diverting that bird from natural behaviours. It could be guarding eggs. It could be feeding. It could be getting food to feed to a baby. It could be courting. You could be interrupting the most amazing courting dance. So that's not okay with me. I'm doing it for recreation. I'm not there. I wasn't there for science. Certainly for some species where we just have such poor knowledge of if they're still even around, using call playback conservatively helps us to confirm species still even exist for some cryptic species. But in a recreational pursuit, I'm sorry, it's not okay.
So how can the punter still get a good experience and be in the eco? Because that's the fine line, right? Like,
look, it is, but I think you need to have a bit of a mental check around gratitude for nature. And not just be always chasing the super rare. And the majority, I just repeat, the majority of bird watchers are not in this category. They're not just chasing the super rare or endemic species. So for me, I'm grateful for anything. I'm grateful every time I walk from my car to my office on campus here. I'm grateful to hear the fairy wrens calling in our gardens. I'm grateful to see the New Holland honeyeater land. So I'm pretty easily pleased. And I think when you understand just how much peril a lot of our biodiversity is in, we need to really cherish and treasure every piece of nature that we still have. And for me, that's how the punters get a good experience. I led a bird walk on the weekend at Hyde Park. Common species, just all common species. But all of the 20-odd people on that bird walk had an absolutely brilliant morning. I was able to explain funky things about the bird's reproduction, about their social structure. It's all of that experience. If you're getting to witness nature and learn something about it, that really deepens and enriches the experience.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head with like the learning aspect and like there's still other aspects that are really interesting and like you might be a certain distance away.
Yeah.
And to create that awe moment is be like, look, you're seeing it from this distance, safe distance, but then you're learning like these amazing facts and that
for sure.
That bit probably needs to be improved on maybe. But I guess then if people are doing these things by themselves, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's right. So, and it's a challenge for our natural area managers as well to be everywhere they need to be to make sure that people are doing the right thing and engaging in ethical practices.
I have one question which is off topic, but it's been on my mind since you briefly mentioned it earlier, and it's a topic that I know a lot of my friends, like we've brought it up, kookaburras.
Yeah.
Their populations are declining, but you said that they're not native to Western Australia.
Yeah.
So kookaburra is probably one of the most iconic Australian birds. So this podcast has a global reach, so everyone will know what we're talking about. Native to the east coast of Western Australia, east coast of Australia.
Yep.
Not native in the Western Australia. I was brought up saying first I was brought up saying that they're good because they get rid of all the snakes.
Oh, yes.
That was on the farm,
Sure.
and then later, get snakes and mice, and so it was like a love-hate relationship. Get rid of the snakes and the mice, but now as I got older, they're bad. My grandparents now don't like because they were killing all the blue wrens.
Yeah.
They're around, and that was like the main thing because we had the blue wrens at the front windows where we have breakfast, and my gran was just saying,
Awesome.
"Oh, we just saw the kookaburra takeout," and it was like, so then they started hating kookaburras. Sure. Soon as something affects a person directly, then their minds,
that's right.
their minds change.
So interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. But so on that note of kookaburras in West Australia, they're technically an introduced species. No?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. Are they bad?
Yeah, they are.
They are bad.
They're totally bad.
Yeah.
They do not belong here. Do you know why they were introduced?
To get rid of the mice? I don't know.
No.
Why?
So you said it yourself.
Snakes.
No, you said they're an iconic Australian species. They were introduced to Western Australia to make it sound more like the Australian bush.
That was the reason.
It was an acclimation technique to make people that
Tourism.
were moving to WA from Eastern Australia to make them feel like they were still in Eastern Australia.
That has to be the worst excuse I've heard for introduced species.
It's a method that had been used. That's why there's blackbirds and starlings in the southeast of this country. They were brought over from the UK and Europe to make Australia feel more like the UK and Europe. It's acclimation. It's to make people cultivate a sense of place.
What?
Yes. So this is why kookaburras are in WA.
No way.
Yeah, because the sound of pardalotes and black cockatoos wasn't enough to make people cultivate a sense of place. We needed something they were familiar with, and by the time people came and settled in WA, they were familiar with the kookaburra, this laughing kookaburra.
That's so disheartening.
It's history, right?
Yes.
So all of the faux pas of conservation of biodiversity, but also
do you know when they did it and like how many did they bring over?
Now it's 130 years ago. So yeah, a fair while ago. So late 1800s maybe or something like that.
And our species haven't adapted to
No. That's small fry in geological evolutionary time, of course. They are a problem for small birds, reptiles, and they are very efficient predators that the native fauna of the southwest just was not adapted for. So no more than anything in Australia is for cats. So
well, that was I can't believe that for tourism. That's such a
not tourism.
Well, not tourism, but like for the making it sound like home.
Yeah,
such a bad excuse.
Well, look, it is on reflection, right? Because we know the implications of moving species around and what that can mean for the endemic fauna or flora wherever you're introducing things to. So we know that now. We have the benefit of hindsight, mistakes made. But also, can I say I'm an East Coaster, and I moved here 7 years ago after living in Queensland my whole life till I was 36, and hearing every summer the arrival of migrant cuckoos that would call all through summer, and so as a result got the name storm birds. And that sound to me is so ingrained in my identity and my memories as a child. And so when you removed from your place, that you feel those kinds of connections. And I had this connection way before I studied to become an environmental scientist. This is just speaks to that sense of place we have to where we grow up and where we feel at home. So as much as a massive mistake it was to introduce kookaburras, I now understand how a soundscape can really influence how well people connect to a place. So
interesting you've brought that up, because there's some studies in terms of trying to restore reefs, and they're by doing that by sounds. So like when a reef is like depleted with fish and the other things that live there, to bring it back, they play the same sounds of what a healthy reef would sound like to bring those communities of like fish and them back to restore.
You can hear parrotfish chewing on coral.
All those sounds. Like it's a really interesting concept.
Well, certainly. So former graduate from here at Murdoch, Claire Greenwell, so she works on seabirds, and I'm pretty sure, if not her research, certainly some collaborators use seabird calls to attract seabirds to new nesting sites that they're trying to get them to recruit into. So if they've got a site that they're confident would be good breeding territories for seabirds, they'll play the calls, and they do it. They've done it in all the sub-Antarctic islands to get shearwaters to come into islands after they've been cleared of predators and things like rabbits and things like that. So sound is an excellent.
Predators are rabbits.
Predators or rabbits on sub-Antarctic islands. So rats and the predators, rabbits just destroy everything with eating and burrowing. They will use calls to let the birds know that they should come and nest here, that it's a safe place potentially. Sound is pretty powerful. Like I said, for me, to not hear the arrival of the summer cuckoos it feels weird. It's bad enough I'm now somewhere that doesn't have summer storms of an evening, that to be missing the sound of the storm birds is, it's definitely something I've noticed.
Why did the kookaburra never make it over to the west coast? Like, what was the geographical?
Nullarbor.
The Nullarbor. They just never been able to cross it. Yeah, right.
There's a lot of birds that won't cross the Nullarbor. That's why Southwest has such a unique flora and fauna, is because.
So this is southwest of Western Australia. For
international.
For the global,
so southwest Western Australia is so isolated. It is in a lot of ways an island relative to the rest of the continent, because just that huge expanse of arid land poses such a barrier to movement. Yeah.
So I'm going to dive into one of your papers.
Okay.
It was Probably one of the most cited ones, I think, by you. Yes, it was
It's a while ago now, 2011.
Yeah. But like very, very big one. So very interesting.
Thank you. Not bad for an undergraduate project.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that one was my third year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
published paper
I know,
before.
I peaked so soon. And then I took on the workload of an actual functioning academic and suddenly, crashed and died.
That's a different topic, I guess, we're talking about.
So yes, but impacts of recreation on birds.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of these. This question here is something that we have talked about a fair bit, but I still wanted to ask this one to get a bit more of a direct answer. So one of your papers, review of the impacts of nature-based recreation on birds, significant finding was that 88% of the reviewed papers reported negative effects on birds affecting the physiology, immediate behaviour, abundance and reproductive success. I guess that have covered. What were some of the main effects and the reasons for it?
Well, let's break it down. So the categories you just listed there. So behaviour, physiology, breeding, success as three of them, right? So it's useful to talk about it in the sense of how does that research happen? How do we actually measure those things? So the research that looks at the impact of recreation on birds can measure a whole bunch of different responses in birds. So it's a response variable. Behaviour in birds, we would potentially measure alert. So when the bird changes its behaviour in response to a disturbance, it looks up, it stops what it's doing. Alert. The next thing we could measure is flight or flee, flushing, all beginning with F, very convenient. And so we'll often say flight initiation distance. What is the distance from the source of the disturbance to the bird when that bird first flushes, when it flies away? So there's been a lot of work measuring. So Mike Weston over in Victoria has done a huge amount of work looking at flight initiation distances for Australian birds on coastal habitats. So those are some of the behavioural measures. We could also measure alarm calling in the exposure of different sources of disturbance. So that's another behavioural one. Physiological, that's been most applied in the context of some of our seabirds, nesting sites. So penguins, for example, penguin nesting colonies, they can go in at the very beginning of when they start congregating and building their nest, before even eggs are actually laid. They can sneak in, researchers can sneak in and put temperature loggers and heart rate monitors into nests. Then fast forward to when they're actually in the midst of nesting and breeding and also exposed to recreational disturbance potentially. And so during peak periods of disturbance, they can look and how does that correlate with the physiological measures we've gathered. Increases in temperature, increases in heart rate. So that's how they measure things like. And then that can be extrapolated to, well, increase in heart rate obviously then means there's a higher energy expenditure factor going on. How well is the bird able to offset that with repeated disturbance over time? Does that bird have the ability to then successfully fledge offspring if they've used up so much energy being stressed out all the time, they haven't fed their babies or something like that? So that's a physiological one. Then the population one is about, and breeding success, that's about monitoring nests in disturbed and undisturbed areas and seeing the difference in breeding success between the two. So there's a couple of ways you can test it. You can test it experimentally by having control and treatment sites. A lot of studies just use observational things and look for different levels of disturbance and attribute what they see to those different levels of disturbance. Yeah, so it's a pretty neat area of research. It's got some really long-standing, well-established methods to measure it, and I think that's why that paper did so well. And it also was all non-motorized recreation, so it really shifted the focus away from off-road vehicles and other motorized sources of disturbance to say, okay, just how much do we do even without the assistance of fossil fuels? basically. So people on foot, people on bicycles, people in canoes.
Dog walking.
And dog walking.
Yeah, that was one of the other questions I had was about the dog walking.
Yeah. So dogs and particularly coastal environments, obviously people love walking their dogs on the beach. We have dog beaches for that exact reason. And dogs, they want to chase things. It's what's natural to them. That is just how they're wired. No different to the cats are just predators and want to kill everything. So really the responsibility falls back to the owner to assess where they are with their dog and what risk that poses to that environment. We don't live in isolation. Our coastal environments are shared with other species. And so, but the presence, and people will often say, oh, my dog wouldn't hurt anything. And that may be true. That may be absolutely true. The bird doesn't know that. So the bird still perceives a threat. Whether the dog is going to actually do anything or not, the stress response in the bird is the same. And the implications of that stress response are the same.
What are some of the implications?
All of those things that I mentioned before around essentially energy expenditure, flight, the energy that's used to get away from a predator. What does that, if the bird was on a nest, those eggs are exposed then. So by being flushed off of a nest by a dog, does another bird come down and pinch the eggs?
Yeah, I don't know how common people realise that, like birds nesting on the shorelines, like in the sand dunes, on the beaches.
Exactly. Yeah. All the oyster catchers, a lot of our resident shorebirds are oyster catchers, stilts, terns and gulls, of course. So, they all nest on the ground.
I've been researching some estuaries in some pretty remote places where no cars and we've had to hike there, and then I've, I guess, become one of the problems because I was walking along and then I'm like, oh God, there's all these baby birds.
Wow. Yeah.
They weren't, they couldn't fly.
Yeah.
And then they would either hide or run. And I was like, for me, I was like, I need to get to this estuary. So I guess I came. And
then it's it's a bit like navigating landmines in that situation when you find yourself in the middle of a nesting field, because they'll often nest in kind of colonies. There'll be lots and lots of them in one place, and they're so well camouflaged. So you could tread on them and not even know. So it's a real management challenge because we as a people, particularly in Australia, are such a coastal loving society. We love being at the beach. We love our dogs. We love taking our dogs to the beach. And it's a real challenge for management to be able to somehow find that happy compromise.
Do a lot of our birds sort of use popular beaches, or is it as soon as a beach becomes popular with people, they don't?
That's yes. So at a point of use, the birds will probably abandon a particular area, not dissimilar to what I was talking about before with being repeatedly disturbed. They'll just eventually give up and buzz off and try and find somewhere else, which, as we said, may or may not be an easy task for that bird. So there's been some success because I think you might have also mentioned when we've been communicating about, are there any solutions to this issue?
That was going to be one of my next questions.
And in some cases it's difficult because it's not a popular position for a government to turn around and go, that's it, the beach is off limits. That's it. We're going to close the beach to recreational use. Not many communities would accept that. So, and politicians don't like making those kinds of decisions because that doesn't win them many votes. So some of the other options that we have is around seasonal wardens on beaches. Again, Australians don't like being told no. We're not a culture that likes being told no and you can't do this. So the better way is to have wardens or There've been experiments having volunteers on beaches during those nesting seasons, at distances away from those active breeding sites, and seeing people walking in that direction, potentially with the dog, and going up to them and just saying, hey, just letting you know this beach at the moment is the site of some nesting seabirds. Would you mind if you put your dog on a lead to walk through this area and walk at the high water mark or something like that? So, and those kinds of approaches and messaging have generally been found to be quite successful if it's in a non-confrontational way.
Yeah.
Not a don't do it. Can you just change your approach a little bit? I think most reasonable people would be okay with that. But it's all in the delivery.
100%. That's a podcast with Tao, Media Communications. He spoke a bit about that type of messaging and like the understanding why. So he spoke about multiple things, but one of them was like the COVID message when he had the anti-vaxxers. The biggest time that got recruitment from people was when the government was saying nothing and just like saying don't do this. But when the lowest recruitment was when there was information out and the government was honest about what was happening. I think that's taking that way of like saying why and that delivery to the people were more likely to understand why.
And it's just the old adage, you win more flies with honey than you do with vinegar.
Yeah.
So if you do it with a smile and in a pleasant way, most people will respond with the desired behaviour that you're hoping for.
It's a lot of effort though to have someone there all the time.
That's right. Again, falls to our retirees a lot of the time. Those people that have the time to give to those kinds of causes, I guess. But, you know, in some of these communities, there are people that are highly, highly committed to the welfare of their nesting birds, and it can become quite an impasse. So down in Denmark, here in the southwest at the Wilson Inlet, there's an ongoing battle between the community that want to walk their dogs in that area and the bird advocates of that area. And it's been a long-standing challenge to find a solution for, you know, they've had their signs about the bird sanctuary vandalized and removed, and it's a really unfortunate situation. Unfortunately, those things do often happen as well, where your actual key decision makers are reticent to take a position and give clear framework to a solution. They keep tiptoeing around the issue and hope it'll go away. That generally doesn't end well. All that does is embolden the opposing sides. So you need a regulator body to be able to come in and find an effective middle ground and put a ring around it. And a lot of them are scared to do that.
Yeah, because if it doesn't, it never wins votes.
Look,
unless the community starts getting onto that.
Yeah, that's right. And it really, the people frequently underestimate the time and the schmoozing that's required to get to this common ground. This is where my sales background comes into it, because I understand to build trust with people takes time. It does take time, and it takes a lot of recognizing where that other person is coming from, seeing things from other perspectives, and being willing to work together and listen to each other.
How do you remain optimistic?
I'm not optimistic. I have hope. There's a difference. So friend and colleague, Professor Hugh Possingham, he responded to a post I wrote about being pretty depressed about the state of the planet. And in his infinite wisdom, he said, I'm not optimistic, but I always have hope. And I think those are words that I do cling to. As I said, I walk in here every day, and as long as there are birds calling out there, there's hope. And that's what keeps me going. I'm not optimistic because I'm not seeing the broad signals among society and our decision makers to really affect change. I think we're signed up for a really different future than what than what we've enjoyed. But I think there is still a lot worth fighting for. And as long as there is something worth fighting for, I've picked a side and I will continue to fight for it.
Hopefully we all do.
Yeah. So,
well, thank you for coming on today. It's been
pleasure.
very insightful.
Cool. No worries. Anytime.
Hey guys, just before we wrap up, if you'd like to support the show, please check out our merch at paramountimportance.com. We have made sure we've gone for the highest quality and most environmentally friendly options we can go. It would mean a lot to us. So thank you, and we'll see you at the next episode. Paramount Importance.